do that. All right.
Sure.
I am here talking with Rick Torseth. Rick, I asked if I could record this conversation because I feel like I could share this with people who are interested in the same question you have, which is, how did I put together a strategic narrative, my latest ebook? So here are some high-level ideas, high-level principles that I followed. First of all, this ebook is designed in Keynote. So, Keynote offers more leeway, more flexibility. It's more design-friendly. The other thing was that I wanted a short piece, so I gave myself the constraint to write something that people could read in 10 minutes. So it's about 1,300 words, I would say. And as I navigated through the genesis of the concept for this book, what I realized is that I wanted to come up with an ebook that I also would enjoy reading. And some of my favorite books are highly illustrated and short, and they almost feel like children's books, storybooks, illustrated books. And so I felt I felt inspired by this. So this book is very graphic, and one of the things I wanted to make sure I do is convey just one idea per page with as few words as possible. So I applied the principle of being very minimalist with my writing. And so I went with those constraints, and I had two documents open in front of me. I had a first version of a presentation that was open in Keynote, and then I had the script version, the written version, in another writing software called Ulysses. That it's a writing specialized writing app. And then I went with that, and clearly, so because I didn't have a lot of room, I thought this has to be really structured as well. And there were a series of key messages started to bubble up, to form, and they became how many do I have? I think I have 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These 8 key messages that I wanted to convey, and so these became my chapter heads to give this book some ebook some structure. That's the other thing I did there.
Did you so go back to that? You don't need to go back to the slide, but so I'm interested in the process.
Mm-hmm.
How you assembled the content that you thought would make the cut, basically, because I'm sure you had a bunch of stuff that initially you thought would probably show up in the book, but then you made some decisions to not use it. But
yep.
So how did you initially gather stuff, and then at what point did you start to sort it into a logical flow?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so many of the ideas that are in this book, in fact, almost all of them come from my daily publication practice, and also from several previous draft of what I thought would be a book they were draft in a completely different format. They're more like, typical linear top to bottom pages, left to right, with lots of text. And so I experimented with what ideas I would want to keep in this book for a long time. I even I tested those ideas with people, and when I would see people kind of frowning, like, okay, this is probably not something that is worth reading. And when I had more like excitement in front of me, I thought, oh, okay, this idea is really probably something that is worth exploring. And so I also had older things, like on page 23 here, I talk about how you sell communities today is through what makes a difference is really a story. And so this picture is somebody pouring three kinds of coffee and having some people test it The researchers proved that the coffee that had the best story tasted the same, but in fact, it's the same coffee in those same 3 pots. See what I mean? So I thought this was an interesting idea. I had tested this through keynotes, through presentations before, and I thought, okay, that would be interesting here. Now, at some point, this book was just a series of ideas. There was no flow, and I had to step back and say, okay, what's the most important thing for my audience? My audience are CEOs, company founders, and business owners, and I landed on, okay, it's people alignment. And I thought, okay, how do we represent alignment? And I think I can't remember exactly where, but I saw someone talk about alignment as people as vectors. And so I thought, gosh, this is very true. And by the way, arrows are probably my favorite shape to draw on my journal every day. I draw arrows all the time to indicate things. So I thought, what if the arrows were the character for my book, and I carry the arrows all throughout the book. They're everywhere. Sometimes so in the first chapter, it's all about how alignment is can be seen as the sum of the vectors. But then when you don't have alignment, it's a mess.
Hey, Guillaume, hang on 1 second. This guy's working in our yard. Teresa, can you shut that door?
Their noise on your end? Yeah.
Our landlords, yard workers are, and he's got a blower, and he's like 10 feet away.
Going for it.
All right, now Teresa, close the door. Thank God she just came home so she could close the door. You're such a sweet woman. Okay, now all good now.
So yeah, so the all of a sudden the concept, the visual concept of arrows became really exciting to me. So, and arrows are really easy to manipulate in a software like this. It's very easy. They're just graphical elements. You don't need any design skills, just an arrow. I mean, it's the simplest thing you can find in PowerPoint or Keynote. And so I thought, I'm not going to, okay, this is the thing. I wrote everything myself. I designed everything myself. I didn't hire anyone. The cost of production for this, besides my time, is zero. It's zero. And that was also one of my design and guiding principle, is I don't want to spend any 1 penny on this. This is going to be me doing it, my authentic self. I have design skills. I went to design schools, and I use my design skill in my work too. So I want this to represent what I could potentially do for a client as well. So I had to come up with smart ways to do that, because I also don't have a lot of time. I was going to go and do some fancy arrows that are hand done, but that brought a lot of rigidity to the process. So I decided I'm just going to use the basic arrows that Keynote has in stock for me, and that's that shape right here. So that's it. So very, very minimalistic, way of thinking about design. And the arrows turned out to be very helpful all the way through the document, even in the last chapter, where I talk about different ways to shape and activate your strategic narrative, and even at the end. So that was kind of a design principle to do that. And then you asked me how I organize my ideas. So this was the messy part of the process, Rick. I had to play with which statement would come first and come next many times with that. And then at some point I had to call it a day, or call it a book, and say, okay, these are going to be the key messages, and that's the way it's going to go. So is it perfect? Probably not. Some people really like this flow. Some others told me, oh, I'm missing this idea, and you talk about your model and somewhere else. Why is this not in this book? And yeah, well, that's what it is. It's imperfect. It's what it is, but the benefit is that it exists. Did I answer your question here, or?
Yeah, so just to stay with that last piece for a second,
Sure.
It seems the way you've designed this and the platform which you designed it on, once you've lived with it for a while, you could come back in and maybe add a piece if you thought it would be useful, because you're not printing anything
Yet.
I mean, meaning, your model, for example, I don't know, there's probably a really good reason why you didn't put that in there. But let's say that at some point you thought there is a place for the model in here.
Yeah.
You could basically create volume or a new edition of it, I guess, with that in it or something like that pretty easily, as opposed to actually having written the physical book.
Yeah, so that brings that flexibility. Just in terms of formality, so I have an ISBN number for this book, and it's also copyrighted. So I think I would need the rules is like if it's minor tweaks, it's okay. But if I completely, if the concept of the books evolve too much, then this would have to be called another book title. It would be another book, so that I would have to add another ISBN number. At this point, I've already collected enough ideas, feedback, and thoughts that I don't think I'm going to evolve this version yet. I'm going to create a part 2 on the same with the same model, I would say.
So talk a little bit about your process for deciding to kill stuff off that you might have thought originally was going to be there, but just wasn't going to make the cut. So how did you get to a place where you could decide this doesn't go in because I've got this process?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a hard question too. I'm not sure I have a very good answer. I mean, by this, I'm not sure I have I'm not sure if I have an easily replicable method. Yeah, I think I read this draft 200 times, and I would test the flow. Like, does this flow? Is this too long? I also tested it with a few people. And in some
this slide, by the way, right here,
yep,
that I'm looking at, I think is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
From a design standpoint, especially where it comes after all the ways you use the arrows and then bring it all together like this. I just looked at this and thought, oh man, this jumps. This is cool.
Yeah. So that how did I decide? So I was really attached to, I really wanted to convey what this could mean for a group that feels a little misaligned or unorganized or maybe dispersed geographically, or, a thousand people. And I had found this research about this data, which is, several organizations carried a similar research, and based on their depending on their finding, it's anywhere between 5 and 10% actually. So I was even nice in saying 10%, but 10% of people understand only 10% of people understand where the company is going. So I really like that idea. At first, I didn't have a good graphic for this. It was more like a chart. And I thought, okay, well, the chart is, everybody knows what a chart is, but what does it really represent? But once I had I had made the decision that people are arrows in my book, then that became much clearer. I thought, oh, okay, well, there is actually 1,000 arrows right here. I can't, this is 1,000 arrows. This is a photo version of it, but I have the graph. I designed this graphing, and I literally copy pasted by grouping them, until I had 1,000 of them, and this is 100 arrows together. And I thought, okay, that's a good enough visual representation. I thought this is gonna be this is gonna talk to people. But if in the beginning of the book, if you read the book, you'll see, okay, this you'll see, okay, I say, basically here, this is I start with this, this is you. So okay, this is a person, this is a human being, and this is you and your team. So you get that arrows are people very quickly. It's easy to understand, and when you see this, you go, oh yeah, that's a big that's 1,000 people. Yeah, I can guess. Oh, that's what it is. So that graphic just put things into context here.
Yeah, it does it really well. especially knowing that there's actually 1,000 arrows there.
Yeah, there's
That's
actually
impressive by itself.
yeah, there's 1,000 arrows in there. But so until the very last minute, I kept playing with the orders of my chapters here, and until I felt like it flowed like an interesting story. There's this chapter, I think I trimmed quite a bit. Initially, it was 2 times or 3 times the size with more detail. So in this chapter, I talk about the difference between a story and a narrative. Most people don't make a difference. I see a difference, and a valuable one for leaders and organizations of all types. And I'm trying to make the case and the important and to define the difference very quickly here. I don't have a lot of real estate in this book to go in a lot of details. I do that in many other articles and so on. But so I have 6 or 7 slides, but that section used to be maybe 20 slides. How did I decide what to cut? I just tested over and over with myself, with people. I showed it to my wife, and she would say, oh, that's still too long. Why do you say this? I get it. But, that section felt like I was really enjoying myself with my own geeky ideas, but not bringing value to people who would read. So I think it just that's the right job here, just fast enough to explain what it is. So I had to go with my gut.
In writing, my dad was an editor, and that thing you just described, your geeky ideas in the publishing business, they call that killing off your darlings.
Right, killing your darlings. That's right. Yeah, I had many other darlings that another thing I wanted to. So let me step back for a moment. This book is the entry door to my ideology, my theory, approach, however you want, my philosophy, however you want to call it. It would be the equivalent of you going to a new church and somebody handing you a little book and say, read this before you come to our service, so that you know how we think here. And so the purpose of this little book is to give enough high-level ideas that are really key to how I work, but not to dive too deep and too far too quickly into details. And that's why I left on the side. I decided not to add my model that I call the strategic narrative canvas, which is more of the actionable piece that I work with my clients once we have those principles established. I decided not to put it in this book, because I thought, okay, I really want this to be a high-level introduction. So my sales coach, Shannon Lee, would call this a hero piece. It's like or the metaphor is the flag you're putting on the ground that indicates your where you are on the landscape. So for me, it's a way to position my company, MetaHelm, in a competitive landscape that is fairly saturated. There are many other people, consultants, doing storytelling work, and it's a way to say, I see this work differently. So this is the hero of all the contents you can read and consume about me, and this is going to go first. So it's a spearhead. Has to be sharp. So I had to kill a lot of darlings here, and so until the last minute I was reversing the order, or should I should this be the last chapter, or I was testing it until I felt like it was really, really as sharp as possible.
I think you did an awesome job. How's it been received now when you got it all done? Where and how do you use it proactively? I know you can find it on your website, but how do you use it? And then what's been the response?
Everybody loves one specific slide. It's this one, slide 56. Everybody stops there and go, yes, I see myself in this. Our company is like what you have on the left. It's like
that's because you tell them. If you
What?
remember one thing in this book, remember this diagram. You're leading them to this page.
Okay. So Rick, I added this line once I had tested this, and I'm reinforcing it.
You shouldn't tell me that. You should say, yeah, I was out in front of this. I saw this all along.
No, the truth is I go, okay, that's the one thing that people seem to find valuable. Remember, I'm just going to tell them what they tell me. So I'm telling them, if you remember one thing about this book, remember this diagram, because that's what people have told me that they remember and they find most valuable. That's the truth. So on the left,
it's a good slide though. I gotta say that independent of your nudge up there at the top,
yeah.
it it has a compelling end. I don't want to say endpoint, but this is where you begin, I think, to show how effective this can all be if you were tending to the work that you had provoked earlier to get to this slide.
Yeah, this is also, there's another layer to this slide, Rick, which is, this is the transformation that I shoot for, that I try as hard as I can, as best as I can, to create for my clients.
Yeah.
And I've seen this many years ago as a young consultant, or I worked in different capacities. I even did the test one day. I walked, it was 10 years ago, I walked into this company and they want me to help them organize a bunch of facets for their business. And I say, okay, can we just print, you're telling me about all those documents, where are they? Can we just print them and see them? And so they emailed me everything they have, their strategy, their brand positioning, their sales deck, all of the key pieces that they're working with. And I printed them and I lay them on the line, align them on the boardroom. And I invited the team to look at this. And I say, what do you see? And people say, well, we see 20 things from 20 different companies. And I say, that's your problem. There is no coherence. Everything is very fuzzy and it's not really connected. How do you expect people to make sense of that mess? It's too much cognitive load here. There's no clarity. So my whole dream, in my dreamland, this is what you see on the right, is you have one core narrative that helps orchestrate how the company works. And these are just 10 examples. So this is also a slide that I help my clients design, and it works with anything you do. Rick, you do coaching, and I've worked with you enough to kind of probably guess that you take your clients from one situation where they're messy, they're uncertain, and to something where they feel more confident, they feel more, at least they're more prepared to handle messy situation and very hairy problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we could represent that for you as well. But I do this, you can do this with technology company, we could do this with any sort of companies. The work that this takes is very clarifying. It's a work of really, getting down to the most simplest idea and committing to it. So right. So that's one of the things that people give me as feedback. So I think that to these days, not very many people have seen my book yet. I published a video version on YouTube, and I published it on March 15th. Today we're June 7th. I have about 200 views on it, so it's not a lot. I have not done a good job yet at telling the world that this exists. I announced it to my list. I want to do a print version. So a print version would require to tweak a few pages because the way the pages goes from left to right, that would require a bit of changes here. But it's on my to-do list. I have to do I want to do a print version, but not very people know about it. I mean, this was not published by an editor, but I always bring it in in initial conversations with potential clients, I show them the fundamentals of what we're going to work together on. I even use that series of 10 principles here to test where they think they find themselves struggling, where they think they might be struggling, or so it's like a very rudimental, high-level diagnostic tool in some cases. I do have a more refined, actual formal diagnostic tool, but this helps me kind of gauge and do a chemistry test with them also.
I think it's great. I think you've done a nice job. Like you say, you can probably look at it 1,000 more times and keep thinking there's something you need to change, but it's good enough to be able to make impact, I think, in terms of who you are and what you're doing. So
thank you.
So I appreciate you giving me the lowdown on how I guess
sorry,
it was
sorry about that.
It was the post you just did the other day about courage.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere in there you mentioned eBook, I think is where you mentioned. I thought, really? So I went to your website, but I also looked in the folder that I had of your stuff, and the book was there. Now, I have a feeling I downloaded it but never looked at it. Because when I looked at it just the other day, I looked at it and thought, this is awesome. I mean, I get what you're doing in what you're trying to communicate for yourself in your work, but I was also quite interested in how you made it and what your process was to build it, because I know there's decisions you're making, what lives and what goes away, and what's the order of stuff, and then how it looks, the aesthetics of it. And it was clear to me that somewhere early on that the arrow had become would be the piece that would be consistent through the deal in terms of helping communicate visually what you're trying to do, and then to see it keep evolving into another iteration that was very imaginative and yet very specific and clear in communicating what it was you're trying to use the arrows for in that slide. I thought, man, that's not easy iteration. You really got to think and think and think. And so I was just curious about the process as much as it was the finished product. So
yeah, it's I wanted to write a piece like that for about 1.5 years. So I guess that's the time it took me. That's the whole time it took me to put it together.
nice.
And
Nice.
I have so much